She led with love. Love wins. And she was one who lived that, who believed that, and inspired that to others, that we might go forth to know the joy of Christ, to know and live in the promises of a God eternal, and to know that that type of joy that nothing and no one can take away, that she was there with that type of joy. So it is we come this day in mixed emotions, sad for ourselves, but also with a type of thanksgiving that God has given us one among us, that we know what it is to lead. We know what it is to be in leadership. We know what it is to love people into Christ's family. For that we give great thanksgiving. For that we will never forget. And through that type of leader, then we are inspired to go forth and to love others, even if we're disappointed, but to love as Christ loves us. At this time, we'll ask Carson if he will come and share with us.
I'd like to thank all y'all for coming. It really does mean a lot. And to everybody that knew her, she was a great person. She meant a lot to all of us, and she'd do anything for us that needed to be done if we needed any help. And you could go and talk to her about anything, and she'd help you out a bunch. It might not be what you wanted to hear, but it'd help you out. And she meant a lot to everybody. And that's all I'd like to say, so thank y'all.
Lee will come and share with us.
Allow me to echo my nephew's very thoughtful sentiments. We thank you very much for being here. Mom loved this community, she loved this church, and she loved her family. It's important to remember some of the key points of her life, what might be called her lessons for us, her enduring lessons for us. She was born in Winston-Salem to Richard Thomas Clinch and Marie Viola Berry. Her ancestral home was not Forsyth County, but Burke County and Oneida, New York. Her ancestors in Burke County, my great-grandfather, Thomas Earnshaw, was one of the great, and great-grandfather Berry were two of the great conductors of trains. I don't know if they were great, really, but the story over years, they became great. You know, Fighting Bear in western North Carolina, just because there were more bear than people there. I don't know if all that's true, but it makes for a great story, and I'm going to keep telling it because Mom told me to. Her great-great-grandfather, Thomas Brotherton, died in the wilderness in the Civil War, or what we call in the South the recent unpleasantness, or the war between the states, and she was proud of his service. George Will, the political commentator, once said, if in the Battle of the Wilderness, if it had been on television, the Civil War would have ended the next day, given the bloodshed and destruction. Mom had a fairly quiet childhood. She had a little sister, Patricia Jean Clinch, who only lived 4 months, but who Mom was very attached to and very disappointed when Patricia Jean passed away so quickly. Her family moved from the Ardmore section of Winston-Salem to the old Germantown Road, which really isn't that far from here. In elementary school, Mom was known for her precision and her charm and ability to work and get along with a lot of people. She went on to Reynolds High School, where she graduated, but not before failing Latin. And she didn't give up. She could have taken something else. But instead, she confronted the obstacle directly, which is a great lesson for life that Mom teaches us, is that perseverance is critical to living the good life and the Christian life. What Mom did is she went and she studied all summer with the nuns at Bishop McGinnis High School, and then became a Latin star, a star student in her class. She didn't give up. She responded more energetically and more thoughtfully. She did a little bit of advanced schoolwork, but then went to work at Watkins Bookstore in Winston-Salem, that old part of Winston-Salem that she loved that now essentially doesn't exist. She was a lover of books and a lover of learning and a lover of writing. She married Dad in 1953 and worked as a librarian at Western Electric, which a number of us who are assembled here today had some connection to. It was a model Christian union of 60 years. I never witnessed a fight. Were there disagreements? Yes. There was never shouting. There was always reconciliation. And my cousin Ralph Mason just reminded me this morning that my mom was the only woman he knew who would go fishing and hunting. Always dressed appropriately, but nevertheless fishing and hunting. Okay. May the Lord be with you. Mom found her Christian vocation in motherhood, not as a librarian, not as a clerk, not as that was her calling. And we all have a calling. And Mom cherished that calling and pursued it with great vigor. She had 3 miscarriages, but she never gave up. She told me years later that she felt by God that she was called to be a mother, and she was going to be a mother. And she was, to both Rick and myself, and a grandmother, which was very important to her. I think there's 3 fundamental lessons that Mom provides for us that when we leave from here is a model of how one should, qualities of the Christian life. First, she was a true friend. She was forgiving. She had no enemies, at least that I know of, or Rick knows of. She was a wonderful friend in small groups, whether it was her Sunday school class or the homemakers group or wherever she was. She was always carrying her load, doing her work, being a true friend. Secondly, Mom had a serious mind. She was a very intelligent lady, but never bragged on herself. She won the Winston-Salem Spelling Bee in 1951, 1952. She would have never told me that unless I found a picture of her that the Winston-Salem Journal had taken. She had a love of books. As a little kid, Rick and I grew up around books. She was a reader. She actually read books, which is particularly important in an age today where people don't read. She knew about the world around her. You could say something and she could carry on a conversation. And she was a brilliant letter writer. Many of you received letters or notes from her. And she was a brilliant letter writer and a communicator who cared deeply about sharing her thoughts and hearing others' thoughts and supporting people. Lastly, she acted out the Christian virtue of modesty. She was incredibly unpretentious. When there was a problem, she would work to solve that problem, assuming her role, taking her responsibility, and then acting on it. She was a model of modesty. She never wore makeup for the most part, didn't wear fancy clothes, and felt that money, that resources, that time that we spend all pursuing consumer goals could be used in a better way. And she took responsibility. Part of the unpretentiousness is taking responsibility for your actions. At Watkins Bookstore in 1950, she was the pen expert. And a person came in to buy a pen, a Schaefer Sentinel, which was an exciting pen that you could have in 1952, a fountain pen. And the gentleman wanted his name engraved on it. So Mom had engraved hundreds and hundreds of names on pens, but on this one, she made a mistake. The period in the middle initial of the gentleman was not properly placed. And she said, well, let me do another pen. She didn't throw it away, as we do often in our disposable society. She purchased the pen and used it the rest of her life. The fellow got a pen that had his name properly engraved, but Mom had a pen. She took responsibility for her actions, and she lived with it. She had so many wonderful qualities outside of these cardinal virtues of her. Her handwriting was the most beautiful of any human I've ever encountered. As a professional academic and scholar who's looked at thousands of manuscripts and thousands of letters over my lifetime, Mom's handwriting was the most beautiful I'd ever seen. It's touching. She was very devoted to her community and the world around her. Her 40 years on the Scout Committee is unbelievable. As membership secretary of the church, Sunday school superintendent. These are not jobs you take on without knowing you're going to have to do some work. These are not ceremonial jobs. These are jobs where much is expected of you, and if you don't do a lot, you're removed from that job, or you're viewed with some skepticism. Mom fought the good fight, never asking for a word of thanks, never asking for any award, no plaques. Probably the happiest day of her life was when Carson Spencer Cheek was born, and who she dearly loved and saw as the light of her life. Her major concern is that Carson would live a good and fruitful life. So Carson, that's the challenge to you, to live that life, to do honor to her and your grandfather. She had many friends in the last few years of her life. One of the heroes of that is my brother, Richard Spencer Cheek, who in the last year and a half brought her home from the rehabilitation facility, and these were really some of the most fruitful and enjoyable years of her life. She had many friends during those times, especially I'd like to thank her caretaker Sherry, who was a saintly person, and is with us today, who became a very close friend of Mom's. At the end, we can thank God for a wonderful Christian life, a great friend who took thinking, reasoning, reading seriously, and realized that the model of Christian life is one that is lived without the hope of any reward in this life, because this life is only preparation for what is to come. Mom, thank you. We love you. We will never forget you.
Rick, if you would come at this time.
Lee is a little more serious than I am. When I think of Mom, I think of more of the comical times. She was the disciplinarian of the family. Everybody loved her. She didn't have any enemies, that kind of thing. But if Lee and I did something wrong, it wasn't only wait till your dad gets home. She would have one of these things called a conniption. And I don't know if you folks know what a conniption is. A conniption is when your face turns red and when the vein in the middle of your forehead starts throbbing. Well, she was a little woman, a petite woman, but she could have a conniption. We learned not to do that. She was a loving person. She taught Lee and myself, as well as other people around her, how to love, taught us how to respect people, taught us how to respect people's wishes. One of the funniest things that has happened within the last 18 months with me spending more time with Mom, I don't know how many of you folks know that she loved ice cream. I had no idea she loved ice cream like she loved ice cream. But I could fix her a steak, baked potatoes, and a salad. She would piddle with that, and then she'd say, "Bring me 2 bowls of ice cream." So I'd go to the grocery store, and I would pick up fruit, diced fruit, bananas, good fruitful stuff, good stuff for you to eat. But if I forgot that ice cream, my butt went back to the store. I can tell you that right now. There's ice cream still in the refrigerator. Every night for 2 years, I fixed ice cream. And I have to be honest, I can't look at ice cream today, and probably will never be able to, just because that was her favorite thing. And it was funny, and when you live with somebody that certain amount of time, you learn a lot of stuff that you didn't know before. We had our little arguments. I think anybody that has been in a long-term relationship, you have arguments. And I'm not saying it's knock-down, drag-out arguments, but it's more yeah stuff that we used to have. I do have to admit that 9 times out of 10 I was right. But that 1 time out of 10 she was right is she never let me live that down. So she would always bring that up. I don't know if that's a woman thing or a mother thing, I don't know. But for the last few years, she has really helped me out. Not only spiritually, she helped me financially. She helped me with a place to stay, a car to drive, a home for my son and I to live in. And she did this unconditionally. No questions asked. It was just understood. And there's not many people in this world today that will do that. And for that, I will always be in her debt. And I'll never forget her. And I just pray that myself and Carson and the folks around her can live up to her expectations, can live up to her type of life. As I stand up here speaking about Mom, as I sat up in the choir looking back, I can see all the saints that we have lost in this church. I can see the Ronald Moores. I can see the Mary Lou's. I can see, the countless people that we have lost here. And, I can see Dad sitting there, and now I'll see Mom sitting there. But, we have to remember that those are the saints that are looking up for us, or looking over us. And, it's not for us to forget them. And that's something that I know that we won't do. I would like to end by reading one of her favorite psalms. It's or just very short part of it. The psalm is Psalm 36, and it's verses 5 through 10. And I myself thought it was appropriate. Your steadfast love, O Lord, extends to the heavens, your faithfulness to the clouds. Your righteousness is like the mighty mountains. Your judgments are like the great deep. O Lord, humans and animals you save.